Vrede vind ik heel erg harmonie. Harmonie met jezelf, met je omgeving. Vrede staat voor mij ook voor een stuk veiligheid. Dat je kunt zijn wie je bent en dat je de ruimte aan een ander geeft om te zijn wie die ander is.
Vrede is voor mij geen oorlog voeren, maar daarbij ook respect hebben voor elkaar.
Vrede zijn met u. Wat is vrede? Er is uiterlijke vrede en innerlijke vrede. Er kan nooit vrede zijn als er geen harmonie is tussen de woorden en daden van een persoon. Als we oprecht naar vrede verlangen, het zij in ons persoonlijk leven of op collectief niveau, is het centrale punt dat we voor anderen graag willen hebben wat we voor onszelf verlangen.
I mean, peace for me is to wake up at your own home. That you know that you are safe there. That you know that nothing bad can happen with you. That you know that you don't need to move out from your home. That your children can go and play in a playground. They can just normally communicate with the other children. You can just talk with the other people on the street. And that you can just live in a society and just do the normal things.
Vrede. Vrede is datgene wat elk mens ten diepste bindt. Omdat elk mens de wens heeft om in vrede met zichzelf, met zijn familie en de samenleving te leven. Maar vrede is een consequentie van absolute rechtvaardigheid. Rechtvaardigheid is de bouwsteen voor vrede.
Ik ben in de gelukkige toestand geweest dat ik veel gereisd heb en veel meegemaakt heb en gezien heb. Met name ook de vluchtelingkampen in Noord-Libanon, waar de Syrische mensen vluchtelingen waren. En dan zie je de angst en de wanhoop in hun ogen die gevlucht zijn voor oorlog. Wij kennen geen oorlog, wij kennen alleen maar vrede. Tenminste, wij denken dat we vrede kennen. Maar mensen nemen het vanzelfsprekend aan omdat vrede er is, omdat ze geen vergelijkingsmateriaal hebben. En dat is zeker niet. Je moet het zelf gaan doen. Ik heb een aantal vragen voor betreffend vrede. Wat is vrede? Vrede, hoe leef je samen met elkaar? Hoewel je allemaal verschillend bent. Hoe kun je samen productief en niet destructief zijn? Dat is vrede.
Vrede staat voor een goede verstandhouding met de medemens. Deze moet worden gecultiveerd. Met andere woorden, een streven naar goede sociale en maatschappelijke verhoudingen. Vrede is dus niet slechts de afwezigheid van oorlog en strijd. In het woord islam ligt het begrip vrede besloten. Door onderwerping aan de schepper verkrijgt men een innerlijke vrede en zal men in harmonie en vrede leven met de medemens en de schepping. De Heilige Koran spoort herhaaldelijk aan tot vrede.
Jazakallah, thank you. Peace and blessings on all of you who have joined us today. And fine afternoon or good evening in English to our guests. I would like to welcome all of you to our 5th annual sort of peace symposium in the Netherlands, organized by the Ouderen organization of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat in the Netherlands. It is a great pleasure to have some esteemed panelists with us today, similar to previous years as well. Normally we hold this face-to-face, but the pandemic situation continues to restrict our movement, and also in the importance of staying safe, we decided to have our second virtual panel discussion this year as well. So with that, we have a lot of questions, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion and the insights from our panelists. I would like to hand over to the host or the chair, so to speak, of this panel discussion, Dr. Zubair Akmal Sahib, and then he will introduce the panelists, and also we kick off from there. So I really hope you enjoy yourselves. We all can learn something new from the insights that we have from our guests, and hope we can also integrate those into our lives as well, because everyone has a part to play in ensuring peace throughout the world. Dr. Saab, please take it away.
Thank you very much. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, ever merciful. Honorable panelists and viewers, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May Allah's blessings and peace be upon you all. My name is Dr. Zubair Akmal, and I will be moderating this second online international panel discussion of Madjlis Ansarullah, Netherlands, that is organized instead of our sixth peace conference for this year due to COVID-19 pandemic. For the information of all participants and viewers, this program is recorded and will be available on the YouTube and Facebook channels of Madjlis Ansarullah, Netherlands. It is our tradition that we start our programs with the recitation of the Holy Quran in Arabic language. The Dutch translation will follow, and English translation will be displayed on screen simultaneously. For this, I invite Mr. Bujna Al-Ahdushi for the recitation of the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. Nederlandse vertaling, hoofdstuk 5, vers 9. O gij die gelooft, wees oprecht voor Allah en getuigt met rechtvaardigheid. En laat de vijandschap van een volk u niet aansporen om onrechtvaardig te handelen. Wees rechtvaardig, dat is dichter bij de vroomheid en vreest Allah. Voorzeker, Allah is op de hoogte van hetgeen gij doet.
Thank you very much. Because we have international panelists and also viewers, we will have this panel discussion in English language. And now I will give some background information and introduction for this panel discussion. This panel discussion is organized by Madjlis Ansarullah, Netherlands. Madjlis Ansarullah is an auxiliary organization of Ahmadiyya Muslim community for men above 40 years of age. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is a dynamic, fast-growing, international revival movement within Islam. Let me begin with a few words about the founder of our community, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. The founder of Islam, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, prophesied that a Mahdi or a reformer, and Isa or Messiah would come after him to preserve and revive Islam's true and essential teachings. We believe that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad occupied both roles and was that very person whom the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, spoke about, and for whom the followers of all major faiths of the world are waiting to come. So our community believes that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is the promised Messiah, and he founded our community in 1889 as a movement within Islam to revive the faith, reunite humanity, and defend the vitality of Holy Quran. He came to end religious wars, condemn bloodshed, and restore morality, justice, and peace. Today, the community founded in 1889 has now been formally established in more than 207 countries and territories, with membership exceeding tens of millions. A unique feature of our community, which is also a driving force behind our worldwide effort towards peace, is Khilafat, or a spiritual caliphate. 5 spiritual leaders have succeeded Hazrat Ahmad alayhi salam since his demise in 1908. Its fifth and current spiritual head, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, is our spiritual Khalifa, our leader. Indeed, a Khalifa of Islam. And he is guide for tens of millions of people around the world. His directives are aimed to promote absolute justice, human welfare, and social harmony. Under His Holiness' leadership, our community has now built over 16,000 mosques, 500 schools, and 30 hospitals, and has translated the Holy Quran into 75 languages. In the true spirit of Islam, the community also operates a disaster relief and development NGO named Humanity First. His Holiness is a tireless champion of global peace. In 2012, he gave a historic address to an audience of over 30 members of the US Congress on a subject of just relations between nations. His Holiness has recently corresponded with prominent world leaders in the Islamic world and the West, warning of a dire consequence of a nuclear war and of weapon profiteering. His Holiness has also addressed the European Parliament in Brussels on overcoming the challenge of extremism. The theme of today's panel discussion is human rights as a base for world peace. This is our 6th peace conference and is being held virtually owing to the pandemic. In the past, we have held our peace conferences in first ever built mosque in the Netherlands, the Mubarak Mosque in The Hague. The format has also been changed to a panel discussion rather than speeches by visiting guests. Now we will start with introducing our panelists, and I will ask one by one for the panelists to introduce themselves. And first of all, I request Mr. Harry van Bommel to introduce himself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Harry van Bommel. I'm a former member of parliament in the Netherlands. I've served several terms in parliament for the Socialist Party. After retiring from parliament in 2017, I was the longest sitting MP in the Netherlands for almost 19 years, spokesperson on foreign affairs, development affairs, and human rights issues. Before entering parliament, I was a member of the City Council of Amsterdam, and before that I was a language teacher at a school for vocational training. At present, I serve as a strategic advisor to a local government in the city of Zwolle. Next to that, I serve as international election monitor for the OSCE.
Dr. Tony Holzler.
Oh, thank you. I didn't hear anything at some point.
It's okay.
Thanks a lot. Well, my name is Anthony Holzler. I'm an anthropologist who studied and did a study on genocide studies, and got a doctorate in that. The study was mostly focused on the core of genocide and the identity making through identity destruction. With that, tribalism and how identity is formed in its more basic form. I've been doing this research for almost 10 years now. I've done many comparative research of many genocides all over, and I've taught this issue in many universities, including the University of Amsterdam, the University of Utrecht, and I work at the University of Twente and the Free University in Amsterdam right now. Therefore, because Harry mentioned that, I'm going to mention it very quickly too. I also was a teacher at a vocational school, and I also guide teachers at higher education level, and also about human rights and human rights abuses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Malik Nassim.
I'm Nassim Malik. I'm from Sweden. I'm a politician from the Social Democrat Party, sitting from the last 30 years in the local government of the Kalmar. and human rights defender and activist, Secretary General of the International Human Rights Committee, sitting along with the executive with Harry von Bommel and Hibatun Noor Sahib. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas Thyssen.
Good evening. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Thomas Thyssen. I'm a lawyer in the Netherlands, in Alphen aan de Rijn. I've been a lawyer since 2007. I always practiced asylum and immigration law, also criminal law, a little bit of administrative law. And since 2013, I started my own law firm, a one-man law firm, focusing mainly on asylum. And since 2015, I got into contact with the Jamaat. And now, my law firm does mostly Pakistani asylum cases and a lot of Ahmadi cases.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nasir Deen.
Good evening and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Nasir Deen. I'm serving as the Vice Chairman of Humanity First International. I'm residing in London, so it's quite international or European, this call, despite Brexit. Humanity First recently celebrated our 25 years of registration, although the previous head of the Ahmadi Muslim community, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad, in 1992, may be pleased with him, he actually initiated the objectives that the community should have an independent NGO that is started and that is totally independent, that allows others also to join with us in a common aim in alleviating suffering around the world. And today we are now registered in over 61 countries. We have individual beneficiaries at the conference. We were told over 11 million globally. We have a number of various programs, from disaster relief to food security, knowledge for life. We have over 49 schools. We have about 9 hospitals, and every day over 4.5 million people benefit from fresh water in underprivileged countries around the world. So I'm here in that capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hibatun Noor Verhagen.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm born in 41 in a Roman Catholic family, and in 68 I joined the Ahmadiyya Muslim community by the grace of Allah. I'm serving as the national president of this community, and I want to use this opportunity to thank, before I forget or miss the chance, to thank very much the Dutch government, which we are obliged from heart to give us the freedom to build here a mosque and to preach our belief freely. And we are most grateful to all participants who are in this meeting. We are very much pleased and hope we will be very successful in future with all the plannings. Jazakallah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And last, Mr. Mirza Fakhr Ahmed.
Pleasure to meet all of you. Welcome again. So I'm the president of the of Madjlis Ansarullah, or the Elders Association within our community. So everyone over the age of 40 is regarded as being part of the Madjlis. So I usually joke that we have a demarcation and a proper sort of a midlife element where once you're over the age of 40, you join the Elders Association. But we're still young at heart. We do a lot of things in terms of charity, in terms of education, and many outreach programs as well. So I cover the Netherlands, and of course in all the other countries where the community is present, we have a similar setup in terms of men, boys, and also a separate ladies organization who organize all separate programs and similar programs as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's start our panel discussion. For this event, our theme is human rights as base for world peace. So we go to first topic is about human rights, and I will do the context. Human rights are the basic rights and freedoms that belong to every person in the world, from birth until death. These basic rights are based on shared values like dignity, fairness, equality, respect, and independence. So the question is, out of rights mentioned above, which would you give the most importance to as being fundamental to achieving the others? The question is for Malik Nassim. I can't hear you. Please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yes, please.
Yes, as a human rights activist from the last 50 years, I started my career in 1971 after the war between India and Pakistan. I was in Germany. There, I taught, and I was in the streets for the peace demonstration, which I have learned in these 50 years, as you said, what is important, and dignity, fairness, you said. And I think fairness is a justice, because justice it ensures that every citizen is assured of their basic human rights. Access to justice is a basic principle of the rule of law. In the absence of access to justice, people are unable to have their voice heard, which is happening nowadays. Exercise their rights, challenge discrimination, or hold decision makers accountable. The declaration of the high-level meeting on the rule of law emphasizes, which at the moment United Nations and the special rapporteurs are emphasizing, on the right of equal justice for all, including members of vulnerable groups, religious groups, minorities, and reaffirm the commitment of member states to taking all necessary steps to provide fair, transparent, effective, non-discriminatory, and accountable service that promote access to justice for all. Delivery of justice be impartial and non-discriminatory. I think this is the most important basic human right for the human beings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then I will request Mr. Thomas Thyssen for the same question.
Yes, thank you. I would give the most value to the principle of equality. The principle of equality, in my view, is the basis for the other mentioned values. It's not a coincidence that in both the American as in the French Revolution, equality is mentioned first when they define the most beautiful principles. I think Thomas Jefferson said it best that when he said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." In the French Revolution, the creed is égalité, liberté, et fraternité. Égalité, equality, also is mentioned first. In the Declaration of Man, we also start with the concept that all men are created free and equal, born free and equal. And when society expects the principle of equality of all men, then it's a small step to agree that all men must be treated equally. And equal treatment leads to fairness, and the principle of treating equal cases equally is the opposite of discrimination. And also, that principle is locked in our first article of our Constitution. So it is a very, very important principle. And as when society accepts that the principle of equality, that means that every human being is deserving of respect, that every human should have equal possibilities to express themselves and shape their lives. On an individual level, the realization that you are equal to your neighbor is a cornerstone for brotherhood. And when one trusts as an individual that you are treated equally by society, then you will trust in society, have peace of mind, even when things are going not so nice or bad in your life, and will help you reach independence. So resuming, in my view, when society accepts that all men are created equal, then that's a good start. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And then I request Mr. Nasir Deen for the same question.
And the fundamental thing that I believe, and that is, I think, coming from my core beliefs as I'm a Muslim, is that dignity is a core quality for the achievement of human rights, because when one is dignified, both the person who behaves dignifiedly and also those who are around him receive and behave in a similar manner. It creates the respect and the value of every individual, and it means that they are treating each other ethically, that it comes out of both moral ethics as well, politics and law. So we see in politics people behaving sometimes extremely bad, no dignity, and that decimates a society which can have a very adverse reactions we have seen recently. In addition, the morality of an individual, how one behaves at home, if he's dignified, how he behaves outside with his neighbors, and likewise those who are receiving that benevolence of that individual, because this comes from our teachings as Muslims, that you must be benevolent to others, and dignity is part of that. And you effectively, you create a better and more rightful society. And actually, from what I was reading, that the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights has said, number one, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, that they are endowed with reason and consciousness and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. So this is where dignity comes from, both morality and practice as well outside. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in the Declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex and language, religion, political, other opinion, national origin, property, etc. So I think that for me, dignity is a very important part.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so thanks for your answers. Let's move on to our next subject, that's about climate change. Climate change is a threat multiplier directly and indirectly impacting an array of rights, including to water, food, health, shelter, and life. Climate change disproportionately affects the most vulnerable, those who are the poorest, most exposed, and have the least resources to withstand shocks and stresses, such as extreme weather events. So the question is, do you think human rights obligations on climate change require the international community to mitigate emissions, support adaptation that benefits the most vulnerable? What strategies for mitigation are in your opinion? The question is for Dr. Anthony Holslag.
Thank you so much that I'm able to answer this question, because it's a very interesting one and a very important one, because it shows also the interdependence we have today with each other as a world together, with many problems that we face actually. And let me therefore say something beforehand, that climate change is a scientific fact. And yes, and it has two elements actually, in the sense that it causes migration of people. People migrate through climate change, but it's most of the time invisible. What I mean by that is that people migrate because of warfare, because of economic reasons, but these are sometimes caused by climate change itself indirectly. But this is going to be more proportionate in the future. Then we have another question, and this is a more legal question, because we have legal standards right now for refugees from war zones, refugees, economic refugees. We don't have any laws yet about refugees from climate change. So yeah, we have to create procedures. Yeah, we have to create strategies. Definitely, we have to do it together worldwide. Like we face many problems today, besides climate change and Corona and other issues. Together, and it's going to be a big challenge for us all, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the same question is for Mr. Fakhr Ahmed.
Yes, thank you. So a slightly different take on this. So I think we are in the middle of, well, nowadays everyone, you cannot switch on the news without, looking at COP26, and there have been 25 COPs before that as well. But I think that there is an obligation in general to ensure that we are, providing for larger communities at a global level as well. if you just take, the question was around climate change, so let me pick that up. So COP26 is ongoing. You would have seen the news. Close watchers will note that, from a science perspective, or, whether you disagree or not, or agree with it or not, that there are changes afoot. Now, that could be taken in a larger cycle or a smaller yearly cycle as well. The facts on the ground are that everyone is feeling the impact. Richer developed nations at the moment, considerable failure to sign up for even basic agreements. That was seen just 2 weeks ago, even from last week from the Netherlands, where we did a sort of a turnaround and a pivot from not signing to signing one of the declarations.
Beating me.
And what's happening is that we are seeing a change in terms of not just poorer countries, because human rights is a universal obligation, not just poorer countries where the brunt is much harder, but really being borne by citizens everywhere, higher gas prices, basic necessities, because everything is linked, as Anthony just mentioned as well. And I think in terms of mitigation, at least the key consideration is justice, I would say, in consuming resources. We have a finite set of resources available to us in this world. Of course, we can explore and go to Mars, but that's not universally available at the moment, far from it. Maybe we need a new UN charter on linking human rights to sustainability goals, things that need to be considered. I was watching, just a documentary just a few weeks ago, where just within a few years, Madagascar, for example, has been devastated due to lack of rainfall, etc. We can argue whether that would have happened 50 years ago or 100 years ago as well, but the fact remains that a lot of suffering is there, whether you associate it to climate change, to natural cycles that happen over hundreds of years, possibly. But we must come together to ensure that we are able to, do justice to those who have less than us, and slowly pivot around to see how we can consume resources in a sustainable manner.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. So let's move on to the next subject, that's about the minorities. In case where inter-ethnic, religious, or other identity-related tensions or discrimination have been a trigger and or feature of conflict, it is particularly important for the nations to be sensitive to diversity within and between communities, and to accordingly prioritize popular engagement and dialogue with minorities and marginalized groups in conflict prevention and peace-building interventions. So the question is, why are the minorities still persecuted around the globe, despite this sort of understandings? The question is for Mr. Hibatun Verhagen.
There are two rights closely interlinked in Islam, I would say. One is the rights of God and the other rights of mankind. Hukukul ibad. You can clearly see it already in the 5 pillars. This prayer 5 times a day together. Fasting, feeling hunger for the poor. Zakat, paying money for the poor. Hajj, a globally meeting. And the first pillar is the belief in God and in the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Something about that. In the first chapter, God speaks in the shape of a prayer. Praise be the one and only Creator, the sustainer of all conceivable worlds. You can pause. There's no limit to that. And then there are 3 other basic universal names or attributes. One is he is gracious, means before any action or prayer, he has provided. He's the provider. And he's merciful, means rewarding actions and accepting prayers. And then the fourth one is master of the day of judgment, which is a big reality, which a Muslim realizes all the time during his prayers and outside his prayers. What I'm doing, are my scales heavy for the good works or light? The prayer continues. Guide, we worship you and ask to help us. Guide us. So the plural here stands for all, it includes all mankind. No doubt about that. Seeing this universal attributes and seeing the plural. Guide us to the straight path of those to whom had been bestowed favors by me, God says. That means all kinds of favors ever displayed are being asked for by God, of which is the highest stage is receiving revelation, closeness, etc. And then it says in the Quran, whoever obeys Allah and the Prophet, now the Holy Prophet comes in, he will be among those on whom Allah has bestowed his blessings. They are mentioned in the Quran, and the highest is the state of revelation, I mean a kind of prophethood. It's a part of prophethood. The name is mentioned, Nabiyyin, the prophets. It must be clear, however, the Holy Prophet's Quran is the last revealed law. It comes later on. Then there's another prayer, when the most famous prayer which for the Holy Prophet, when they hear his name, is a prayer, "Oh Allah, bless the Holy Prophet and his followers, his true followers, like you have blessed before Abraham and his true followers." So very briefly, it's very clear, what were the blessings to Abraham? There was numerous prophets. So the highest rank is available for all mankind without a mediation. So that shows the unity of mankind to get the highest stage that God gracious has always spoken and was always approachable, and he will always be approachable.
Thank you very much. And the same question about minorities is for Mr. Harry van Bommel.
Yes, for the listeners or the viewers who just tuned in, I think it's important to rephrase the question or repeat the questions. Why are minorities still prosecuted around the globe, despite the sort of understandings? I think that we have to acknowledge that there are two important trends in today's politics, in today's societies. One is the trend that laws and politics are based on exclusion rather than inclusion. I will come back to that later. A second trend that is visible in today's politics in the Western world, very much so, we see it in the United States of America, we see it in Europe, is the so-called identity politics. Now, the two trends meet each other in today's politics. The two trends show that nation states that are based on citizenship have laws that exclude people who do not have the citizenship of the country, of the nation state, or of one of the nations in the European Union. I just mentioned that as an example because these days in the 8 o'clock news, we see people coming from Africa and other parts of the world trying to enter the European Union through Belarus and being stopped at the Polish border. Obviously, exclusion is leading to a politics where people are not able to come to security, to come to welfare, to come to an economic place where they can earn a livelihood. People escaping from countries where they are not safe, countries where they are prosecuted because of their background, sometimes their religious or their ethnic background. So exclusion is a dominant trend in today's politics. Secondly, the rise of identity politics. We've seen that in the United States, where there is a two-party system. We see that in Europe, where identity politics have led to the exclusion of Muslims in many European countries, to Islamophobia, where people are afraid of Muslims. We see it in violence. We see it in other trends in today's politics in European countries. So when identity politics and politics of exclusion meet each other, then the road is paved to people of different background, be it ethnic, be it religious, of being persecuted, being discriminated. This is a serious risk of peace in Western societies, and therefore I think that we should work together in eradicating discrimination, in eradicating exclusion in politics.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's about the minorities, and let's move on to migration. So maybe it's also the same trend what we are following. By the end of 2017, more than 68.5 million people had been displaced from their homes due to violent conflict, persecution, famine, or natural disaster. These figures show clear humanitarian implications of the global refugee crisis, as vulnerable populations need access to appropriate shelter, food, medical care, and social services. Yet there are also important geopolitical considerations, as refugees can place physical strains on and pose a security risk, if only indirectly, although the vast majority of refugees never directly or deliberately participate in violence or arrive in destination countries with hostile intentions. So the question is, how can this migration and refugee crisis can be improved? And the question is for Dr. Antoni Holslag. I can't hear you, Dr. Antoni Holslag.
Here we go. Okay.
Yeah, I hear you.
Thank you. I was saying thank you so much that I'm able to answer this question. And when I received this question, it was closely related to the first question and even the second question and third question. I think I want to state very openly that, and we have to realize this, and that's what's also what Bill basically in the first answer to the first question is that we don't have an international community. How can I say it? We don't have really a sense of an international community. We don't have that. We have a sense of a national community. And like Van Bommel said, right now, identity politics is playing a very important role in that. And by also doing that, also basically closing off refugees, right? Closing off refugees from Europe, closing off refugees in America. Countries are building walls, literally, or want to build walls, like in the United States. So the sense of a global community that will solve the problems. We have a sense of that in the United Nations, maybe, but in real politics, that sense does not really truly exist. And that causes one of the major factors in the problems that we have, also with global warming and all the other issues we discussed today. So if you go, to rephrase the question a bit, also for the viewers, so let me go back to that. How can this migration and refugees crisis can be improved? First of all, it can be improved by changing the laws that basically don't allow people to come in today, right? We call Europe we call the European fortress, for example, right? For a reason. So how can it be improved? By first of all, But the question, don't look at the small minority that causes problems. Look at the majority that does not cause problems. That's the one you want to look at, because that's the one you want to aim at. And we should stop ourselves through identity politics, and we should focus more on the international community instead of the national community. And we should try to seek the national interest with the international, on an international level. Hopefully I made myself clear. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. The same question is for Mr. Thomas Thyssen. So I will repeat, the question is, how can this migration and refugee crisis can be improved?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I think it's an illusion when politicians in the Netherlands think that they can tackle or mitigate migration. Migration is caused by pull factors and by push factors. Push factors being wars, famines, other natural disasters, inequality. And the pull factors are the good conditions in our country. And inshallah, they will never change. So inshallah, there will always be pull factors. And unfortunately, there will probably also be push factors. So what we need to accept is that migration is not something that we can manage or something that we can change. It is something that will always be there. There will always be migrants coming, looking for a better place, looking for a refuge, looking for shelter, or looking for opportunity. And the way that our country copes with that now is basically trying to keep people apart from our own population centers in camps, vet them, select the people who meet the criteria for to become a refugee, give them access to our country after sometimes, unfortunately, a very long procedure, and for the rest they try to send the rest away or ignore them until they go away themselves. It's basically a negative attitude towards migration. We only help the people that we must help. It's literally formulated like that in law, and that is a missed opportunity. I think we can, at a small level, at least profit from migration, because people who come here are not necessarily a burden. Why should we see them as a burden? People are capital. People are positive. A population is good. A workforce must be here. Our population is aging, and we need fresh hands. I spoke today. Today I assisted a young man from the Punjab in court, and I was talking with him. And even now, when he was in the camp, with all the restrictions placed on him, he was able to start his own business with Uber Eats, selling food, and in the night he cleaned. And yeah, he made a very nice income. And then that makes me wonder, what would this boy be able to achieve here if we would just give him access to our labor market? I think a lot. And I think that many people who come here should not be seen as a burden, and that we should not look at migration as something negative, but that we should really think, accept that migration is something that will be always here, and that we should change our society in a way that we can benefit from this phenomenon, and that migrants also can benefit from this. So yeah, in my opinion, we should change our attitude towards migration and migrants. And that's it, thank you.
But there are some borders, right? So you cannot have unlimited persons. A country can have some limited persons. How can you deal with that?
I agree. I do think that you cannot just let everybody in. On the other hand, if an unlimited amount of people comes in and we cannot send them back because they will be persecuted, we will have to accept them. We will have to let them in. So what I propose is not a change in that with that regards. But what we could say is, when we vet people to see if they meet the requirements as a refugee, we could also, separately from that, vet them and say, well, okay, what have you been in your country of origin? A nurse. Oh, well, do you have the skills that we need? And see if we can connect them in our economy. And yeah, because the people are coming anyway, why not look at their skills and what they can contribute to our society? And why do we only look at, are they refugees? Are we obliged to take them? Why don't we look at, hey, is there a win-win situation for everyone?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So let's move on to the next model, and that is about youth. The lives and experiences of young people are more complex than generally portrayed, and youth can play many roles within fragile and conflict settings, including perpetrators, victims, and peacemakers. Empowering youth is essential for prevention and peace-building efforts. The question is there any role for the youth in the prevention of conflict and building the peace? The question is for Dr. Anthony Holzlach.
Thank you so much, and hopefully I'm not mute right now, right? You can hear me, okay?
Yes, I can. Yes, thank you.
Once again, thank you that I'm able to answer this question, and it also goes back to the former questions actually. And also, what I want to state is that what I think when I look, I teach a lot actually, quite a lot, and I deal a lot with young people and youth. And what amazes me is that these young people are much more aware of the future in a sense, and much more aware of the dawning task heading ahead of them. What I mean by that is that there are so many problems right now that are globally instead of nationally at this moment, that these young people are actually forced to look at these things also on a more different level than we did, for example, or at least I did when I was their age. So what can young people do? So to go back to the question very quickly, is there any role for the youth in the prevention of conflict and building the peace? Well, let me say, first of all, as genocide scholars, conflict is most time caused by crisis. And it could be a climate crisis, it could be different crisis, but most time underneath a conflict lies most time a different crisis, a political crisis, an economic crisis. And that causes the conflict. It can go to the extreme, for example, to genocide. And do the youth have a role in that? Yes, of course they do. Because they do have a different attitude about these issues. And they do see the dawning task asked of them to look at that. And I think it's also up to us to go with them and lead them into that, and also take a step into that by also trying to look at these problems, like, for example, global warming and migration and refugees, and try to look into the future, for example, and try to see, okay, there's going to be more refugees and more migration happening in the future. And these kids are going to deal with that and going to deal with the consequence of that and the conflicts attached to that. And that's also, by doing so, by dealing with these issues, is also natural peace building. Indirectly sometimes, directly sometimes, formally or informally, but they're trying to build peace basically by acting on these greater issues that causes these major conflicts in the future. These are already causing conflicts now, but will cause even major issues in the future. And any crisis today that we have, any violent crisis today that we have, always has a political, economic, or even an environmental background, or a cultural background, as a matter of fact. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. So the same question is for Mr. Hibatunu Verhagen.
Yeah, Jazakallah. I can humbly speak only about my experience in our community, which is a huge positive matter. In fact, it's youth start, of course, because about the parents first. So the system in the community in Islam is, in fact, select your partners carefully on moral qualities. And one of the first and the most very important thing is Islam is characterized by the Holy Prophet under the name chastity. is very precious and important thing, which, shortly saying, no relations before or beside the marriage. And then there are prayers for the progeny. In each daily prayer, one prays for the parents and grandparents, and one prays for the children, even the grandchildren. And the wife prays for her, and the partners pray for each other. So men and women, both they pray in their daily prayers. And then you have an example. The Holy Prophet Muhammad said that the best of you is he who's best towards his wife. And he said, I am the best. So where we find that example, he was 23 years an example for Muslims how to practice the Quran. And he lays so much stress. He said the mother earns 3 times more attention and respect than the father. But she is the first, Then of course they have the parents have an example for the children and everything. They form the children in young age. The mother, of course, more than the man, but still in the house, how they talk, how they behave with the neighbors. Do they do backbiting, which is forbidden, or spying, or so these kind of things very important that the parents give an example. Saying the daily prayers, for example, a simple example, to learn that was the atmosphere and to get into it. The woman has been a very high level, as I already mentioned, which she has in Islam. Even in Quran, Mary is put as an example for men. Some are linked with chastity, of course, and devotion. And then, of course, in our community, have a system where in the fourth caliph, he started that the parents, before they get children, they both decide that the child which we will give, we will get, will be devoted for the service of the religion. And this system will continue. There's tens of thousands, I think about 70,000 at the moment, and it continues. It's a very wonderful system. Then, of course, the girls are being organized on young age, up till from 7 till 15 or so. And then above 15, they are becoming an older group, the adult. The boys, also from 7 till 15, is a special group. They have, their own programs, their own meetings, their own activities. And the boys up till 40, from 15 to 40, still we call them the young people. They are very active in our community. Because, for example, recently in Almere, they participated in blood donation, and the Sanquin organization said we have never had in Holland so many people offering themselves for blood donation. So they will cleaning activities, tree planting, food distribution, folder distribution also, of course. Humanity First, so they have a very active role. All the activities they are being held there, and mostly, that's the thing in our community, we work as volunteers. The only few in Holland, we have 6 missionaries, 4 buildings, and the rest are all volunteers. And each country has that, the system. Majority, like MPA, for example, is a big, 24 hours TV without commercial attachments all over the world, financed by the community itself, and by donations and by volunteers, most of them. The International Association of Architects and Engineers, and they work all over the world on different kind of projects. So I just want to round up to say, well, the youth, I think, very positive, thanks to God.
Thank you very much. And the same question is for Mr. Fakhremel. I will repeat. The question is there any role for the youth in the prevention of conflict and building the peace?
Thank you. So absolutely. So I've been involved with youth, not just as a parent, but also as heading up the youth organization and being involved with them for a long time in the UK. This really is a question very close to my heart. So first of all, youngsters, youth, however you want to phrase it, it can go either way. So the role is definitely there, but the future needs to be there as well for them. And that is in terms of guidance, in terms of motivation, in terms of encouragement. If you don't see a future for yourself, then really it's a very quick and very short journey to the lowest common denominator. You see that, in terms of child soldiers, in terms of others. So if as like Amir mentioned, if the guiding hand is there, then you can certainly guide and encourage and work with youth towards a better future. Otherwise, you always end up with some youth, and you see it both in terms of climate change, in terms of other areas, where youth are really vocal because social media has given them a platform to do so, and they are very adept at this. So I think the future is bright from that perspective. There's much more awareness, and really the future is with the youth in any case. I would just like to mention one thing that, as respected Amir mentioned as well, the motto of the youth for us is that a nation cannot be reformed without reforming its youth. And this motto was, or this guidance was given to us by the second caliph of the community. And this is quite instrumental in both for the older generation and the youngsters as well to take it to heart. Because really both at a local scale, national scale, or a global scale, change will not happen unless it is embedded from a very early age, because that's the age where you are impressionable, and that's the age where you take on certain aspects from your elders and from the society around you, and you start on a journey which could be for good or for bad. So that's I think the main thing I would like to say. Interestingly, the organization, the youngsters organization, is called Khudam-Lendi, which is service to Ahmadiyyat, or servants of Ahmadiyyat. But one of the core tenets is called in English, it's service to humanity, which is instilled in the youth from very early age. And I think if that is done, through all the available constructs, that really does make a huge difference to how youth are brought up. Now, what I'm going to do is really put my friend from the UK in the picture. I know he wasn't given this question, but he has had a long, I wouldn't call it career, but a long history of volunteer work with youth. So I would like to request Nasiruddin Saab as to his input as well on this. And you're on mute.
Okay, that's a good start. I've worked, as you know, with yourself, with our youth community here. I'm sure I might not have heard it, but the second head of our community, Hazrat Mirza Bashir Mahmood Ahmed, he coined a phrase, obviously a part of his speech, that a nation cannot be reformed. And you have to just remind me again, and that the reformation of a nation is dependent upon its youth. That's probably the better way for me to describe it. And what that means is that, as I would say now, we're being addressed in the Elders Association here, but it's a responsibility of all of us, who I would say, who have left our youth behind in some way, to, if we really do care about the future, both from a climate change or from a piece of society, is to really try and mend the ways that we probably have seen in our lives and inculcate a slightly more cohesive approach in the youth. For example, we've seen how if the youth are misled, they can become virtual zombies under one master. And we've seen them as children acting as soldiers in sometimes parts of Africa, but also even in Europe during the fascist period, the youth were targeted by the regimes to brainwash them in some way and under their command, so that even they were committing crimes which they did not even realize were crimes, because according to them, these were things that were natural and they were protecting their families and country. So the impact of youth is very important. How we've tackled it, I think, is to be proactive with them. And I think it's important to know that in the community of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, I always thought, why are you a member of the youth from the age of 15 to the age of 40? It's a very wide, 25 years of your life you're still recorded as a youth. Although from the age of 7, you join an auxiliary, the younger youth, but after 15. And another thing that the community has, it has an electoral democratic position within each auxiliary, so that each area, so like a local locality, they have like a qiyadat, which is a number of youth, and they will elect from among themselves whoever's paid their subs is eligible to vote in the election. I'm talking about the males section right now, that they can elect. The ladies have their own section and their own budgets, but they can elect a youth leader known as a guide, and then he appoints a youth committee who do their own programs to enact and to add value to society, to improve themselves spiritually, but also, as we've heard from the Emir of Holland, how they would enact and create a positive environment, not just for themselves, but for their neighbors, for their communities, and do some humanitarian work. And I always thought, why is this age between 15 and 40? Because when I got to the age of 39, I felt a bit old, but then I realized that I was partaking in my local election where I was voting for, I thought this young man should be a good leader. And so the minute he became the youth leader, he would say, Nasir, can you not, we would say Nasir Saab out of respect, but what he basically said, can you help me? Can you go and do this or do that? And I would go along, and I could drive, and I would take a few of the other youngsters with me. And so the committee would have people of all age groups, at the age of 40, and I was a father, and he was probably at 18, just leaving his university or going to university. So, what it does, and this is the point I'm trying to make, it bridges the gap of generations. The problem that a lot of the youth have, a lot of societies have, how do you communicate with the younger generation? And this organization, it's known as Madjlis Ansarullah, it actually, that the gap that you see and the problems that very early on, they're nipped in the bud. If there's an issue, there's no generational gap as such, because you're talking and meeting people of much younger age, and they could be in authority or given positions of authority and responsibility. And it alleviates, and the ethos then of communal work is done much better. So I think, and that creates a peaceful society, I think. And I think that's a good model. I mean, it's something which I mentioned to lots of people who are not members from our community, and they can see the logic and the advantage of having a way to engage with the youth.
Thank you very much. So let's move on to the next subject, and that's about peace. The peace nurtures the hope of forgiveness, community, and reunion with those with whom we share the planet. The peace of billions of people together is a force of nature. When we see ourselves as separate from our community and from nature, then violence and strife arise. The question is, how can we achieve a state where we can respect the individuality of others but still create a peaceful community? The question is for Mr. Thomas Thyssen.
Thank you very much for this question. Well, in order to achieve a state where we can respect the individuality of others, but also create a peaceful community, I think it is very important to have a strong constitution. A constitution, for example, like our constitution that we have in the Netherlands, it's a beautiful constitution with a lot of classical human rights and social human rights. However, a constitution cannot just be, it must be alive. It must be read, it must be taught, and also, in my view, law should be tested towards a constitution. So a constitution should be, number one, when it comes from the legal point of view, but also it should be important when we teach about society. And so it should also be on the roster on schools. When it comes to classical human rights, the classical human rights, they guarantee individual rights like freedom of speech and so forth. And it is nice when children or young adults learn where those rights come from, that there are shared values in all cultures and religions. And also, when you talk about these rights, it is good to make people realize that these rights are not absolute. Your right ends where it conflicts with the right of somebody else. There are, unfortunately, a lot of individuals today who think that the freedom of speech gives them the right to insult other people. And they basically say it. They say, I have the right to insult everyone. And that is so wrong. It is, from a legal standpoint, absolutely wrong, because in our country, it is forbidden to insult somebody. It's just a criminal offense. But people don't know it. They don't realize it. They don't realize that classical liberties are also limited in their scope. So it's very good if people from a young age learn about the classical freedoms, where they start, what they give, where they come from, and also where they end and how you deal with them responsibly. Secondly, about the social rights, it is very important in society that social rights are also active rights, and that the government really does their job when it comes to affecting social rights. It is difficult, of course. Social rights are never absolute. However, when you have a society where, as a government, you strive to organize society that way that when people are honest and hardworking, and they pay their taxes, that they will be able, that they know they will be able to buy a house or rent a house, start a family, send their kids to school, and gradually improve their existence, then there will be peace from that side. And in general, we should, of course, strive to spread knowledge about classical rights, where they come from, and knowledge about who we are and what connects us. Because when we see that, for example, the principle of equality is not just a law, it's in Islam, it's in Christianity, it's everywhere. It is something that we share. When we see that, inshallah, then we will see that we are one and individuals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the same question is for Malik Nassim. So I will repeat, the question is, how can we achieve a state where we can respect the individuality of others, but still create a peaceful community?
Yes, it's very easy. We live in a diverse world, but must learn to respect each other's view, promote tolerance, and understand each other's points of view, and develop a consensus of respect and tolerance in society. Calm your mind, simplify your life, educate yourself, and teach others about injustice and inequality and about peace. Orient your professional life towards peace. Transform interpersonal conflicts, transform community spaces, or use them for peace learning and actions. Transform your structure tied to the dynamics of war, violence, injustice, and inequality, or withdraw resources and support for war. And this is something very important for us, as we have seen in the last 20 years, the wars in the name of peace and to bring peace in the world, I don't want to go into detail, but we have seen what the results are due to these wars, where the 42 countries bombed some countries, We discussed about the refugees and all these people have come out because due to these wars. Then again, disrupt narrative that justify war. And this is very important. I say it again, disrupt narrative that justify war and rationalize inequality. Leverage of the power of music, art, and culture for peace. This is something very important for the youth also. Create or support structure for peace and justice. And this is something very important. All those we are sitting here. So I request also our friend Mr. Harry, who's a politician also, that these things are very important in our local government, in the local societies, to create and support structures for peace and justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So let's move on. In the piece, we have a next question, and that's about peace and security is an essential factor of human life. A peaceful and secure environment is critical to every society since it affects all aspects of economic and social development in a country and is necessary sine qua non to the realization of human rights. The question is, why is peace important to society? And this question is for Mr. Harry van Bommel.
Thank you very much for the question. As one of our speakers said earlier, peace is more than the absence of war. Peace means that there is a society with justice, with democracy, with human rights, respect for human rights, and some sort of equality. Now, all these themes have their own definitions. People will define equality differently. People will define democracy differently. But to meet the basic rights that are mentioned in our Constitution, that are mentioned in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, socio-economic rights, when these rights are met to a certain extent, then I think we can speak of peace in a society that has a basis for justice for all. As in the central theme of the Ahmadiyya community, hatred for none and peace for all is something that should be in laws, in rules, and in a culture. But it can only be effective if everyone acknowledges the importance of peace, and that peace is not just a noun, but also a verb. Peace has to be maintained. Peace has to be worked for every day by everyone in a society. And only by having respect for the fundamental rights that are there in the Constitution and in other important documents and laws and rules, only by respecting those rules, we can have peace and justice for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we are talking about why is peace important to society, and the same question is for Mr. Nasiruddin.
Thank you. I will talk more from the humanity first, what we're doing and what the issues we think are that need to be addressed or that cause an unpeaceful society. But the concept of peace, in one's home and around is known. So, if you have conflict anywhere or any type of conflict within your own circle or just around your neighborhood or whatever, it creates a very unpleasant place to live. So it's not something that is just confined to war zones. So we heard, these peaceful societies, there are certain prerequisites to have that peace. And one of the prerequisites that is important is these basic necessities that really are a human right. For example, the recent conference that I mentioned at the beginning that we held for our 25 years anniversary, where over 61 countries joined virtually, was poverty alleviation through empowerment. Now, we are, as a charity, feel that this is a very important thing to eradicate hunger, extreme poverty. It restores human dignity, but this is also one of the goals but the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals has. And this is a kind of a guidance that really, I think if mankind can achieve it, we will have peace. I mean, one of the goals is zero hunger, and within just a few years now, no poverty, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitization, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industrial innovation infrastructure for all, reducing inequalities, sustainable cities, the 17 goals. But what I want to talk about is really what the issues are right now, where, unless we look at these, I mean, one of the things that we saw in Humanity First during this last nearly 2 years now of the pandemic was that, of course, we hear of hunger. There's around 1 billion people globally who have malnutrition because of lack of food. But actually, we were surprised to see we have opened up a number of food pantries, food banks, they call them in England, and other food distribution services in the Western countries. For example, in America, Canada, hundreds and thousands of meals have been distributed for the needy, and you would not expect that there. So some of these things, and obviously that creates all sorts of issues. Also here in the UK, it's 2 food banks have been organized, but I can tell you as a community, maybe 140,000 meals have been served in the last few years on the streets of London. And that's to people who you would not normally think would need food. So the inequalities that we are seeing, for example, we've got 7% of the world children are orphaned because of conflict, natural disaster, or health inequality. UNESCO reports that 75 million children worldwide do not study, have no school. That's with a literacy of less than 50% in a lot of countries. Nearly 900 to 800 million people have no safe drinking water or sanitation. They walk miles for water. The health outcomes are extremely bad. Mortality rates are very high in poor countries, but also within this pandemic we saw within the United Kingdom, poorer areas had a higher COVID risk. So, there's inequality there. And other sorts of, such as eyesight, healthcare is extremely poor. So this creates issues that do need to be tackled, and that if we can look at this would create a more peaceful society. One of the current head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, His Holiness. He addressed UNESCO actually in October 8, 2019, just a few months before the pandemic. And he was explaining the ethos, which I think is why it's important for world peace. He says, "Where out of human sympathy we seek to eradicate poverty and destitution, we also consider it to be the key to developing sustainable peace in the world. Only if people have food to eat, water to drink, shelter, schooling for their children, and healthcare will they be able to live in peace and escape the deadly clutches of frustration and resentment that lead people towards extremism." And as we've seen on the borders of a lot of European countries, a lot of the victims are coming. These are all the basic human rights. And so until we help people flee poverty and destitution, we will not see true peace in the world. So I hope that's an answer in a nutshell.
Yes, thank you very much. So let's move on to the next question. The United States and NATO allies' war in Afghanistan may be over, but the debate over the legacy of American longest war has just begun. President Joe Biden said last night in Kabul, the United States ended 20 years of war in Afghanistan, the longest war in American history. According to the US Department of Defense, the total military expense in Afghanistan from October 2001 until December 2020 was $825 billion, with about another $130 billion spent on reconstruction projects. The UK and Germany, who has the largest numbers of troops in Afghanistan after the US, spent an estimated $30 billion and $19 billion respectively over the course of the war. The question is, was this war necessary? Do you not think that if this sort of amounts are spent on peace efforts, they bring more positive results, like human development, zeroing the hunger, less infections in climate, less painful and depressed families? So this question is for Mr. Hari van Bommel.
Thank you very much for this important question. The war in Afghanistan has been the war most dominant in the last 2 decades. And basically the question is, was this war necessary? If any war at all can be necessary, then one can say that this war was definitely not necessary. First of all, this war was for domestic consumption in the United States of America. It was a reaction to the September 11th attacks on the Twin Towers. Obviously, the United States of America had to act, and it was announced by the President of the United States at that time that the US would hunt the culprits down to wherever they were. They have used the NATO alliance for this purpose. Obviously, invoking Article 5 of the NATO treaty was a way to get the other NATO members involved in this most ridiculous war, to hunt down those who were responsible for the 9/11 attacks in the United States. Obviously, other methods that eventually were used to find and kill Osama bin Laden were more effective in stopping Al-Qaeda than attacking Afghanistan. Many countries, also my own country, the Netherlands, were involved in this war that has destroyed Afghanistan, that has not brought peace in Afghanistan, and that has returned the country of Afghanistan centuries back in history. So it is obviously that this war was not only unnecessary, it cannot be called self-defense. Article 5 of the NATO treaty is if one country is attacked, then all countries are attacked, and all countries, all member states of NATO should contribute to the fight that is there. Article 5 is in essence an article based on self-defense. That is not at stake in the Afghanistan war, and it has not brought peace, and it has not made the world more safe. Therefore, unfortunately, the casualties and the money spent has been in vain. And obviously, the second part of the question, could the money have been spent in a better way? Yes, definitely, both for Afghanistan and for all the other countries in the region that are now facing the negative fallout of this unwanted and unneeded war in Afghanistan, unfortunately.
Yes, thank you very much. So the same question is also for Mr. Malik Nassim.
Yes, I totally agree and stand by the previous speaker on this issue. I think I just go forward in that the defense industry needs to be revisited, and personnel need to be, as he said, that the personnel need to be retrained for a peaceful coexistence with politicians taking the lead. The same funds, as I said, the same funds should be used for the development of the human race, uplift the standards of living, promote infrastructure, let the developing world use their own resources for their development and not to be given expensive loans and loans to repay the installments. Train skilled person locally, give them money that they can train these people, alleviate poverty, promote education, tolerance and peace in the developing world. as we have seen in the recent, as the previous speaker said, we have seen the recent, just 3 days ago, the budget of the United States, that they have said that we will invest in the infrastructure of the country. I think and I hope all the countries will start thinking on this, that we can help the underdeveloped countries also and our own countries. And here I can say, I'm proud to be a Swede, that Sweden was not the part of that war because it didn't have the mandate of the United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are talking about peace, and the next question is, what does Islam has to say about achieving peace? And that question is for Mr. Hibatunur Verhagen.
Islam, the word already means peace, like it is easily recognized by salam and shalom. And peace means having harmony, being in harmony with the creator and with the creation. So this was the first explanation. Yes, but I want to use this opportunity to go a bit further about religious peace, that Islam is 6 points of belief, and one is, I want to concentrate on that, believe in all prophets, 124,000, and all revealed books of laws. There were 330. So this number is to be found in the books. So this is the basis of interreligious peace, to recognize that God has always sent his messengers. And the last and the perfected religion was by the verbal revelation to the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in the shape of Quran, plus then the illustration of the contents and the practice, how to practice it in the period of 23 years in the life of the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So always this will be till the end of time, these two sources where Muslims can be discuss over and can teach it to each other, and somebody who is deviating from it can be called to account that the Quran says this, Prophet did so. So this is always a matter. I want just to give one simple example, which is very important. Every Friday prayer, the Prophet has a certain prayers which has to be read by the Imam in the Friday prayer, and also he can give a speech, whatever. But this particular part is that God is a command of God in the Quran. Allahu yamaru bil atl wal ihsan wal ita'i zil qurba. God commands you to be just and to be good to others, take the initiative, and to try to treat others like your own family members. So this will be always a part of the Friday sermon. I just want to say that this is such an important message and ideal and target to go for. So I just want them to continue on this topic a little bit more, that what has Islam to teach, really. So this is really a topic for my heart, I would say. That is that the promised Messiah has come. And it's not just a belief, it is based on these really sources which matters. So I just want to mention a few, just to bring it in the notice of those who are not yet knowing it. And that is, for example, starting with the Old Testament and the New Testament, there are prophecies, and you can find it in the Introduction to Study of Holy Quran in Dutch, they're available in English. There are 40 pages containing prophecies about the coming of the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He was descending from Abraham, everybody knows, from his son Ishmael, his firstborn. These already are very serious foundations to take serious. So this is one thing to go and see and look. And then comes the coming of the promised Messiah. And one key, I just had to limitation of time. For example, the Jews were asking Jesus that you cannot be the Messiah because before the coming of the Messiah, Elijah will come from heaven. So Jesus said, and that's a key for everybody to take very serious about his own second coming. Jesus said that Elijah, where you are waiting for, is standing before you, that's John the Baptist, because he comes in the spirit and the character of Elijah. So that people turned away. So the same is happening now in the Muslim world. The 23, the Holy Prophet said there will be, the Jews are divided in 71 sects, the Christians in 72, and my community in 73. And only one will be rightly guided. So there's a matter to think of, that all the 22 sects, they are rejecting the Ahmadiyya community on the same basis, a literal explanation, and the division of so many sects shows there is something wrong in this community. So the promised Messiah was supposed to become as a Hakaman Adalan, a just judge, a judge to decide what is true, what is false. So he got revelations, and he was, supposed to, in the Quran, and all the commentators, all the Muslims believe that Messiah will come. That's one thing, Shia and Sunnis. But only the interpretation is quite different. They expect that he comes to kill the disbelievers. But that means the sword of the pen. The promised Messiah came and had the title, the King of the Pen. So he wrote so many books. They are all available on the website to find and read. There was revelations which he got. For example, he got one revelation just to make a very important one, that I shall cause their message to reach the corners of the world. But today, we are very much witness of that. The Humanity First had this conference just 30 October. In the community is spread in 200 countries. The caliphate is now in the fifth caliph in more than 200 countries. And Humanity First is active in 61 countries and is flourishing and growing everywhere. So how it comes, how such a prophecy could have been fulfilled by a liar, So this was very, he would come to end the wars. He would kill the Satan with the final battle in the seventh, he would be coming in the 7,000th year, according to Christian scriptures. And to kill the Satan in the final battle, and that will be a battle with convictions and arguments, Like now, I was very happy to hear the view of Harry van Bommel and the Simonic stuff about the wars, how it goes on. That money could be used for the better purposes. So thank you very much for having me this opportunity to say a little bit about this. Jazakallah. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. And the same question, what does Islam have to say about achieving peace, is for Mr. Fakhr Ahmed.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. So I think this is one of the last questions anyway, the normal format. So I think I would like to cite the words of the head of the community, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmed. So similar questions have been asked, and we have an annual peace conference in the UK, which hasn't been held for the last few years owing to the pandemic. Of course, our friend Harry has been there in the past as well. And in 2019, citing Islamic teachings to offer a solution to this turmoil, because that is, one of these questions, what does Islam have to say about achieving peace? His Holiness stated that the Islamic viewpoint is that peace can best be achieved through unity. Yet regretfully, instead of uniting, we are seeking separation and prioritizing our individual interests over the collective interests of the world. I believe that such policies will and already are undermining the world's peace and security. Elaborating on this and explaining how Islamic teachings provide peace to the world, His Holiness then said, to get an accurate portrayal of Islamic governance and leadership, how Islam has operated in the past, that is, these are my words, we should look to the era of the founder of Islam, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him. After the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, migrated to the city of Medina, he formed a covenant with the Jewish people whereby the Muslims and Jewish citizens were to live together peacefully and with a spirit of mutual sympathy, tolerance, and equity. Continuing, His Holiness said, the covenant was and proved to be a magnificent charter of human rights and governance, and ensured peace between the different communities living in Medina. According to its terms, all people, regardless of their faith or ethnicity, were bound to respect the rights of one another. Freedom of belief and freedom of conscience were cornerstones of that treaty. Of course, it was a much longer speech. I've just given some excerpts from His Holiness's speech during that conference, but I think it embodies the Islamic precept and the Islamic teachings regarding peace itself.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we are at the last question of this panel discussion, and this question is for all the panelists, and that is, if you had the chance and could do one thing, what would you do to achieve everlasting peace in the world? So first panelist, I will ask Mr. Hari from Bomo.
Thank you very much for this challenging question. I think it is important to see what we can do today in our own society, in our own world, within our own profession and our own capabilities. My suggestion would be to introduce a worldwide obligation and a register of all arms trade. No war is ever fought without arms. So if we could have a complete, transparent registration of all arms deals worldwide, of all money spent on armament, then that would be open to everyone, so that each citizen of the world could have access to what their government has bought, has sold, what proportion of the national budget is being used for this purpose. Then I think that people would include this knowledge in their right to vote for national parliaments, for European Parliament. And if that was done worldwide, I am sure that this would make a difference. People will definitely prefer their tax money being spent on healthcare, especially these days, on education, on international solidarity, instead of war, instead of armament. I think that would make a world of a difference. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
For Dr. Antonio Holslag, about what would you do to achieve everlasting peace in the world?
Thank you so much for this question. Let me also state that this question kept me up at night. For how do you answer this? I could only look at it from a genocide scholar point of view, which we tend to look at most big processes that take place in society and what happens from the bottom up, that develops an environment where people think they have the right to kill other people or dehumanize other people on the most basic level. And I think any warfare, to a certain extent, falls in the definition. So I looked at this question from that point of view. You can still hear me, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So I looked at it from this point of view, and I already heard the word unity, and I saw Steinberg, I think, in the comment section, he said contact, and I think that's completely true. I think it's one of the elements that we could do is create unity and contact, but I think there's another element to that, and that is this idea of that we have to enhance our identity through the identity of others, by demonizing others, dehumanizing others. I think that's where we should start. I think we should start to be able to be humble again. And see each other face to face, not as differences, but see our commonalities more. And take the commonalities more central as humans, and not as different nations or as different people. I think that's where the problem lies with many of the conflicts that we have today. We have borders, but we create the borders, we make the borders, and we upheld them. So I think that's where everlasting peace starts, is by basically creating one world again. It sounds very corny, but creating one world again, I think that's the best way. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So the same question for Malik Nassim. I can't hear you. I think you have to unmute.
Just a minute. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes. The simple answer is we have seen in practical the political situation with justice are the only methods that we can bring peace. War, and as our friend Harry von Bommel said, that the weapon industry and the weapons, I think what we should try, what we should use now, not the weapon and with sword or the bombs, the weapon is the pen, and if we should use the pen and the education, then I think we can bring justice with the speed, with the truth can help us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Thomas Thiessen.
Yes, thank you. I find it a very difficult question. I think in our daily life, we should just propagate love, acceptance, and tolerance, and learn about each other and connect with each other. And when it comes to bringing peace and saving the world, if you save one person, you save the whole world. So yeah, let us bring peace to the world one by one, and let us save humanity one by one.
Okay, thank you very much. Then the question is to Mr. Nasir Deen.
I think it's kept all of us up, this question. We've heard about what is quite common among all. There's to be a unity, and deeds are. The Holy Prophet he said that deeds are judged by motives, and the motive of a good deed, or so-called apparently good deed, behind it, there may be some other motive which then dechecks and creates not a peaceful society where some people go to war in the name of peace. But actually, as we've seen in some parts of the world, in the Middle East, for example, it's created havoc. So the utopia question you have, what you do, the idea would be that the United Nations really does become truly a United Nations, where man comes together in a brotherhood of unity, where their motives are pious and their deeds will show that. And at the moment, we don't have that, and all of the issues we have globally, one could say it's obviously to do with self-interest and politically motivated, and as I mentioned earlier, the poverty that is there. But we all know that the natural resources of the world are, although they're finite, but they can, if used effectively, a lot of the issues that are coming up around the world, if man was again under a true United Nation, and that would really alleviate and create a more peaceful society.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the same question for Mr. Hibatunur Verhagen.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, Islam gives a wonderful solution that if two Muslims or two persons are fighting, then the other Muslims should have a committee and talk what is the problem, and then solve it in such a way that both parties will agree to it. And so that if one of the parties should later on will deviate from it, the others can force them easily to adjust to the rules of justice. So this is a very simple rule, but I understand that at the moment the word is so complicated, but it's mentioned in the Quran. So I fully support everybody who wants to stop the war, use the money for the positive things where there is the need. People are hungry and no education and so on. Misery, great misery. A huge amount of money is spent there. So so that's the main thing. If that could be changed, I think it is also the prophecy of the promised Messiah swords will be changed to plowshares. Everybody understand. So that time I hope it can be seen. And I mentioned previous time also one other thing. It has a link with it that all the Muslim world should be sent a book from the Sir Muhammad Safullah Khan. He was companion of the promised Messiah, and he has a great career as in the International Court of Justice, Vice President and President, and then President of United Nations 16th session. He wrote many books on religion also, human rights and Islam, for example. You can see it. But he wrote one small booklet called Punishment of Apostasy. So there he explained with his great gift and talent that Quran does not allow force. And then he quotes the verses of Quran. He says anybody who use force, he will have to remove 400 verses of Quran. If you force somebody, and there's another argument, very simple, we mentioned, if you force somebody, you make him a hypocrite. And that is worse than a disbeliever in the deepest of the hell. So if this booklet, which says also no death penalty for apostasy or blasphemy, he also proves it very clearly. So if this could be sent to the Muslim world, and also ask that they should spread it to their people, and from the leaders, the governments, and the religious scholars, and say, yes, we have to agree with it. If Quran says so, the Prophet is so, we have to unite and then stop the war there. So that is, we should clean our own house. Jazakallah.
Thank you very much. So that was the last question of this panel discussion. We are now at the end of this event, and I invite our national chairman, Ahmadiyya Muslim community, once more, Mr. Hibatul Verhagen, to say some thanks and closing words.
Well, the closing words I would gladly say, but I want to say the prayer when Mr. Fahah Masab, he's our respected member of Jamaat, not only, but he is also a family man, the descendant of the second caliph, so also a descendant of the promised Messiah. So I would request him for leading the prayer. And then, of course, from a deep stop from my heart, I wish to thank you very much that you spent your time and your expertise and bring us inspiration and hope for improvement on all the fields. So may Allah bless you all, and may we also be able to see a change during our lifetime. Jazakallah, ahsanal jazak. So Mr. Saab, could you please add something if you want, and also lead the silent prayer, please?
It's very kind. Thank you so much. Again, on my behalf as well, I would really like to thank the organizers who have been working very hard on these teams, but really all the panelists. It is no matter how many sessions you hold, whether on an annual basis or face-to-face, it is always a real pleasure to listen to the insights of our colleagues, our friends, and invitees to these panels. So from the community, thank you to all the panelists who joined for sharing your feedback. We will be in touch with yourself as well afterwards as well, of course, so it doesn't stop here. And of course, I would like to thank the viewers as well. We tried to restrict it to 2 hours. Thankfully, we have done that. Otherwise, it could have been extended. And really, it is all us putting in our little bit of effort towards the promotion of peace. We pray by raising our hands in a certain manner, like so. You can pray or contemplate in the way you feel more comfortable with. So please, for those joining us on YouTube as well, please join me in silent prayers. Amen. Again, thank you so much, and I wish all of you a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much once again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vrede, heel erg harmonie. Harmonie met jezelf, met je omgeving. Vrede staat voor mij ook voor een stuk veiligheid. Zijn wie je bent, dat je de ruimte aan een ander geeft om te zijn wie die ander is.
Vrede is voor mij geen oorlogvoering, maar daarbij ook respect hebben voor elkaar.
Vrede zijn met u. Wat is vrede? Er is uiterlijke vrede en innerlijke vrede. Er kan nooit vrede zijn als er geen harmonie is tussen de woorden en daden van een persoon. Als we oprecht naar vrede verlangen, het zij in ons persoonlijk leven of op collectief niveau, is het centrale punt dat we voor anderen graag willen hebben wat we voor onszelf verlangen.
I mean, peace for me is to wake up at your own home. That you know that you are safe there. That you know that nothing bad can happen with you. That you know that you don't need to move out from your home. That your children can go and play in a playground. They can just normally communicate with the other children. You can just talk with the other people on the street. And that you can just live in a society and just do the normal things.
Vrede. Vrede is datgene wat elk mens ten diepste bindt. Omdat elk mens de wens heeft om in vrede met zichzelf, met zijn familie en de samenleving te leven. Maar vrede is een consequentie van absolute rechtvaardigheid. Rechtvaardigheid is de bouwsteen voor vrede.
Ik ben in de gelukkige toestand geweest dat ik veel gereisd heb en veel meegemaakt heb en gezien heb. Met name ook de vluchtelingenkampen in Noord-Libanon, waar de Syrische mensen vluchtelingen waren. En dan zie je de angst en de wanhoop in hun ogen die gevlucht zijn voor oorlog. Wij kennen geen oorlog, wij kennen alleen maar vrede. Tenminste, wij denken dat we vrede kennen. Maar mensen nemen het vanzelfsprekend aan omdat vrede er is, omdat ze geen vergelijkingsmateriaal hebben. En dat is zeker niet. Je moet het zelf gaan doen. Ik heb een aantal vragen voor betreffend vrede. Wat is vrede? Vrede, hoe leef je samen met elkaar? Hoewel je allemaal verschillend bent. Hoe kun je samen productief en niet destructief zijn? Dat is vrede.
Vrede staat voor een goede verstandhouding met de medemens. Deze moet worden gecultiveerd. Met andere woorden, een streven naar goede sociale en maatschappelijke verhoudingen. Vrede is dus niet slechts de afwezigheid van oorlog en strijd. In het woord islam ligt het begrip vrede besloten. Door onderwerping aan de schepper verkrijgt men een innerlijke vrede en zal men in harmonie en vrede leven met de medemens en de schepping. De Heilige Koran spoort herhaaldelijk aan tot vrede.